Hello everyone, and welcome to Once Before Dawn. I am the storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment, where are you from and what time are you watching? The missing hour. Lydia Graham had never thought of herself as superstitious. She didn't flinch at black cats, didn't toss salt over her shoulder, and considered horror movies more amusing than frightening. Her world was quiet, grounded, filled with routines, warm tea, crossword puzzles, and an old stone house at the edge of a sleepy town named Grenton Hollow. Nothing unusual ever happened here. Until the nights changed. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Lydia would wake in the dark with no real cause. No nightmare, no loud noise, just awake each time she turned to check the clock on her nightstand, and it always read the same thing. 3033 a.m. She'd squint at the glowing red digits, sigh, roll over, and drift back into sleep. But then came the dreams. Faint things, shapeless and hollow. Dreams of moving, of walking barefoot through grass wet with dew. Of soft voices she couldn't place, calling her name from far away. At first, she dismissed it. Sleep disturbances happen to everyone, especially in your 40s. It was probably her mind reacting to too much caffeine, or the long hours spent editing manuscripts under the dim desk lamp. She adjusted her sleep schedule, drank herbal tea, tried ambient playlists with rain sounds and wind chimes. But the time never changed. 3033 a.m. Wide awake, no dream remembered, but always the lingering feeling that something had happened, something she couldn't quite grasp. It was only when she started noticing changes in the room that concern turned to dread. The first time, her bedroom window was open. She never opened it, especially in late October. Grenton Hollow was prone to cold night winds, and Lydia hated the chill. Yet there it was one morning, the latch undone, curtains swaying slightly in a breeze that smelled faintly of damp earth. The second time, it was her slippers. She always left them beside her bed, facing outward, right by her feet. But that morning they were across the room, near the front door, damp on the soles, as if she'd worn them outside. She stood there for a full minute, heart thudding, staring at the trail of water spots on the wooden floor. She lived alone. That evening, she double-checked every window, every door, locked them, pulled the curtains tight. She even placed a teacup on the doorknob, a trick her grandmother once taught her to detect nighttime intruders. If someone opened the door, the cup would crash to the floor. Simple. Effective. But when she woke at 3033 a.m. the next morning, the cup was still on the knob. And yet her slippers were gone. She found them later outside on the back porch. No footprints in the frost-covered grass. No broken latch. No open door. Just her slippers. Sitting neatly, side by side, as if someone had placed them there carefully. That day, she went into town. She didn't tell anyone what was happening. Grenton Hollow was the sort of place where word traveled too fast, and the last thing she needed was gossip. Instead, she walked into the hardware store and bought a small digital recorder, voice activated, compact, something journalists used, the clerk said, for interviews and late-night notes. She thanked him and didn't mention that she wasn't a journalist, or that she wasn't interested in recording interviews. That night, she placed the recorder on her nightstand. She set it to start automatically at 3030 a.m. Then she went to sleep, and once again, the dark pulled her under. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows in long, pale shafts as Lydia sat at her desk, staring at the small voice recorder. Her tea had gone cold beside her elbow. She hadn't touched it since hitting play. The night before, the device had recorded exactly 1 hour from 3030 a.m., and its little indicator light confirmed that audio had been captured. It was a small gray rectangle with no screen, only a timestamp and a few buttons. She held it in her hand like it might burn her. With a trembling thumb, she pressed play. At first, silence. Then, the rustle of sheets, breathing. Her breathing slow and steady, deeper than normal, almost drugged. She didn't remember dreaming, but the sound of herself in sleep was unnerving. Foreign, like listening to a stranger. Then came the shift. 32 minutes in, a second sound joined the recording, a soft click, like a door latch giving way. Lydia's skin prickled. The breathing changed, became lighter, fainter, as though she had gotten out of bed and stepped away. Then, Footsteps, slow. Bare feet against wood. Each step creaked gently, not from weight but from age. Floorboards shifting beneath her as if they were used to someone walking this path in the dark. Her voice came next. She gasped. Not from pain or fear, more like a sigh of recognition, like she'd found something. Then came the whisper. It wasn't her. Lydia, it crooned. A low, slurred murmur, high-pitched, genderless. Too close to the microphone, too close to her ear. Then came her voice again, faint, sleepy, willing. I'm coming. That was it, just 2 words. Then footsteps again. A creak. A rush of cold wind across the mic. Then silence. The recording ended at 4030 a.m. She remembered nothing. Lydia sat still for a long time. She didn't eat breakfast, didn't shower, just stared out the kitchen window, watching frost melt off the grass. Something about the recording wasn't just disturbing. It felt wrong, as if it hadn't been a dream or sleepwalking, as if some part of her had left, voluntarily. That afternoon, she wrote a note on a yellow sticky pad and pressed it to her mirror. You are home. You are safe. She didn't believe it, but she needed to see the words. That night, she placed the recorder beside her bed again, along with a second one on the porch. She also left the lights on. She wasn't sure why. That night, Lydia left every light in the house burning. The overhead in the kitchen. Even the small reading bulb beside her bed. The soft golden glow gave the illusion of warmth, but it didn't reach the corners of the room. Shadows still collected there, quiet and patient. She set both recorders, one on the nightstand and one just outside on the back porch railing, nestled between a rusting lantern and an empty flower pot. She stared at the second recorder for a long moment before going inside. There was no wind, no owls, no distant highway hum, only silence. By the time she lay under her covers, her heart was already racing. She glanced at the clock. 10:42 p.m. A long way to go. She awoke in darkness. Not the normal velvet black of night, but an absence, as if light itself had been swallowed. The lights she'd leapt on were off. All of them. She could feel the wrongness before her eyes fully opened. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. She sat up slowly. Her hands reached blindly across the nightstand. The clock was off. Dead. She found the recorder by touch, and her fingers closed around it like it was a lifeline. She didn't know what time it was, didn't know if she had slept for minutes or hours, but something had changed. She didn't remember lying down again, couldn't recall the feeling of sleep taking her. But when she next opened her eyes, the lights were back on, and daylight pushed weakly through the curtains. She didn't get out of bed, not at first. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying not to remember a dream she couldn't recall but felt beneath her skin. The clock blinked. 8:03 a.m. With effort, she forced herself up and padded across the wooden floor, grabbing both recorders. Back at the kitchen table, wrapped in a wool blanket and nursing a fresh cup of tea, Lydia played the indoor recording first. Just like the night before, it captured breathing, movement, and, again, at exactly 3033 a.m., her voice. This time it was different. Her tone was firmer, louder, still slow, as if drugged, but deliberate. I have to go, she said. Then the sound of her walking. A whisper answered. A hiss, unintelligible. Then wind, faint chimes, the sound of a door swinging shut. End of recording. She didn't hesitate. She played the outdoor recorder next. Silence. Then the door creaking open. And then her voice. From outside, clearer than before. Where are you? She asked the night. Her voice was still soft, not panicked, but there was something desperate in it. Then a rustling in the grass. Another voice, closer this time. Closer. Lydia dropped the recorder. It clattered across the table and the playback stopped. Her tea trembled in its mug. She stared at the device. Not because of the voice, but because she recognized it. It was her own. The day passed slowly. Lydia didn't leave the house. She moved from room to room like a ghost, curtains drawn, slippers dragging across the wooden floors. Her thoughts clung to the recordings. The voice that sounded like her, but wasn't quite her. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, like a shadow version, a mirror with something just slightly off, the kind of wrong that made your stomach turn even if your ears couldn't explain why. By noon, she had unplugged every light in the house, checked every outlet, tested every breaker switch. Nothing was malfunctioning. No outages had been reported in Glen Hollow. The local electric company confirmed her grid hadn't gone down. And yet, all the lights had died the moment the clock struck 3033 a.m. She checked her slippers again. Damp, again. Only this time, there was something else, a smear of mud. She bent down and pressed her fingers into the sole. It crumbled at her touch, soil, rich and dark. She knew the kind from the woods past her backyard, where the trees grew so dense even the wind got lost in them. She hadn't been to those woods in years. She followed the trail outside. Morning dew still clung to the grass, and the air was thick with the scent of wet leaves. As she stepped around the side of the house, her breath caught. Footprints, clear, bare, and leading away from the back porch. There were two sets. One was hers, small, narrow, with the soft imprint of her heel from where she stood at the edge of the steps. She could recognize her own tread in the dirt. But the other was smaller, thinner, childlike, and barefoot. The prints wove through hers, as if someone had been walking alongside her, one set going forward, the other slightly behind, like a child being led gently by the hand. She followed the trail to the edge of the woods, where the trees loomed tall and unmoving. The prints stopped at the tree line, vanished into the tangled underbrush. She stared into the trees for a long time. Nothing moved, but she felt watched. That night, she brought the recorders back out. Added the third, older one she found in a drawer tape-based analog, the kind her father used to dictate letters into. She placed it near the tree line, hidden beneath a pile of leaves, pointing toward the path. And for the first time since the pattern began, Lydia didn't sleep in her bed. She set up camp in the living room with a blanket, a thermos of tea, and a hunting flashlight. The front door locked, the back door bolted, a chair pushed under the handle. She sat, watching the digital clock on the mantel as it ticked toward 3030 a.m. Her eyes were heavy. Her head nodded once. Twice. 3032. She sat up straight, fingers clenched on the flashlight. 3033. Nothing happened. No light flickered. No wind stirred. She stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. Then, a sound. From upstairs, something soft, like a foot dragging slowly across floorboards. Lydia stood, and the flashlight went out. Lydia's breath froze in her chest. The silence after the flashlight died was worse than the sound itself. Her eyes strained to adjust, but even with the light still on downstairs, a thick shadow hung around her, like something had soaked into the corners of the room and refused to leave. Another sound upstairs, this time more distinct. Tap. Drag. Something moving across the floorboards of her bedroom. She stepped slowly toward the stairs, her hand brushing along the wall until her fingers found the old brass sconce light. She flicked it on. Nothing. It stayed dark. She flipped it again. And again. No power. Her mind raced. The lights had been on before. This wasn't a blackout. It wasn't the town. It was her house. Just her house. Again. She moved toward the stairs, her legs shaking so badly she had to grip the railing to steady herself. Creak. Another sound, not from above this time, from the end of the hallway. She spun. The front door was open, just slightly, like someone had pushed it in and slipped inside. She hadn't heard it open. She hadn't heard anything. The chair was still in place, wedged beneath the knob, yet the door hung ajar. Lydia's mouth went dry. Then came the footsteps, deliberate, soft. From above, she turned back toward the staircase. Tap, drag, tap. Each step echoed through the walls, as though the house itself was listening. She climbed. Every stair moaned under her weight, and the shadows grew thicker with each foot of elevation. When she reached the landing, she paused. Her bedroom door was open, just a crack, just wide enough to see a sliver of the room, and the light inside was on, the only one still working. She pushed the door wider. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled like someone had thrashed violently. The closet door was open. The curtains had been drawn apart, but no one was there. She stepped inside, slowly, carefully. The air was colder than the rest of the house, though she hadn't opened any windows. Then she noticed it. The mirror. It stood in the far corner. She'd bought it from an estate sale years ago, a tall, freestanding thing with an arched wooden frame and clawed feet. Heavy, elegant. She never paid much attention to it. Tonight, it looked wrong. The reflection was off. Not distorted, not cracked. Just wrong. Her room reflected back at her, but not exactly. The covers on the bed were smooth. The closet door was shut. The lights were off in the mirror. And worse, she wasn't there. She stood in front of the mirror and saw only her room, not herself. She took a step back. The mirror remained unchanged. No reflection. Then, behind her, the soft sound of breathing. Close. So close it brushed her neck. She spun around. Nothing. The room was empty, but the mirror had changed. A girl stood in the center now, small, barefoot, wearing Lydia's nightgown from when she was a child. Her face was Lydia's face, younger, pale, and smiling. The girl raised one hand and pressed it against the glass. The light in the room flickered once, then died. Lydia stood frozen, heart pounding like a drum echoing in the stillness of the room. The flicker of light left her swallowed in darkness once more. Thick, absolute, suffocating. The air felt heavy, pressing down on her chest like an unseen weight. Her eyes were locked onto the tall, freestanding mirror in the corner, its arched wooden frame ornate yet worn, an artifact from some distant past. But something was wrong. The reflection it cast back was not quite right. The room inside the mirror was perfect. The bed neatly made, the closet door shut, the curtains drawn. No sign of disorder or disturbance. And most unsettling of all, there was no reflection of Lydia herself. She took a tentative step forward, her breath catching in her throat. In Miles. The mirror's surface was cold beneath her fingertips as she reached out to touch it, her hand trembling. Then, from the glass, a faint whisper, a voice so soft it barely rose above the silence of the room. "Come!" The single word drifted through the air like a beckoning sigh, carrying a promise and a threat all at once. Lydia's heart raced as she peered closer. Suddenly, the mirror's surface rippled like the surface of a dark pond disturbed by a falling leaf. The pale figure of a little girl appeared inside the glass, standing in the exact center of the reflected room. She was barefoot, clad in a white nightgown that looked decades old. Her pale face was disturbingly familiar. It was Lydia's face, but younger and untouched by the years. The girl smiled, a small, knowing smile that sent a shiver down Lydia's spine. Then she lifted a hand and pressed it against the glass, as if trying to reach out to her. Lydia's skin crawled. She wanted to step back, to run from this impossible vision, but her feet felt glued to the floor. Suddenly, the room lurched. The walls seemed to warp and twist. The air thickened until Lydia felt like she was sinking into darkness itself. Her breath hitched and her knees buckled. She was falling, endlessly falling. Lydia landed with a soft thud on cold, damp earth. A thick fog curled around her ankles, clutching and swirling like living smoke. She was no longer inside her house. She was somewhere else, somewhere impossible. The sky above was a flat, oppressive gray, heavy with clouds that blocked out the sun. The trees around her were tall and twisted, their gnarled branches reaching out like fingers eager to snatch her away. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. She was mute. Reaching into her pocket, she found nothing. No phone, no recorder. No sign of any of the things she had brought. Only fog, only shadows, only the echo of footsteps just beyond her vision. Then a faint childish laugh echoed through the trees, bright and cruel. Lydia spun around, searching for the source, but saw only the twisted trunks and swirling mist. And behind her, footsteps, bare feet, light and soft. Closer, closer. She ran. The fog thickened as she sprinted blindly through the forest. The trees seemed to close in around her, their shadows stretching and shifting in unnatural ways. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she could not stop. Something was chasing her, something that did not want her to escape. Ahead, through the fog, Lydia glimpsed a faint glow, a clearing, a place that promised safety. As she burst into the open, the source of the light revealed itself, a small girl seated on a fallen log humming softly. The girl was the same one from the mirror, barefoot, in a white nightgown with a face that was unmistakably Lydia's younger self. The girl smiled up at her, eyes dark and endless. "Come play," she said, voice sweet but with a sharp edge. Lydia's breath hitched. "Why?" she asked, voice trembling. "Because you left," the girl replied simply. "Left what?" Lydia whispered. "The missing," the girl said, standing. "Those who cross when the hour is lost." She extended a pale, cold hand. Lydia hesitated, then took it. The world spun once more. The world spun in a dizzying whirl of shadow and light. Lydia felt herself pulled through a tunnel of swirling mist and whispering voices, as though time itself had unraveled and reknotted around her. The cold grip of the little girl's hand lingered, ice biting into her skin, rooting her to a place that was neither here nor there. When the spinning ceased, Lydia found herself standing on soft moss beneath a sky smeared with dusk, purple, and bruised, as if the heavens themselves were bleeding. Around her stretched a landscape that defied memory and logic. Twisted trees with bark like ancient stone, their branches weaving into a dense canopy that filtered the faint light into fractured shards. The ground was uneven, covered in patches of fog that swirled like restless spirits. She looked down at herself. Her clothes were the same, yet they felt heavier, damp with dew. The air was thick and smelled faintly of earth and something else, something metallic, like old blood. A shiver ran down her spine. Ahead, through the thickening mist, she spotted a faint glow. Drawn to it, she stepped cautiously forward, senses heightened to every sound, the crunch of leaves beneath her feet, the distant call of an unseen bird, and the soft susurrus of whispered words that floated just beyond comprehension. As she neared the light, a small figure materialized. It was the girl from the mirror and clearing, but here, in this place, she seemed somehow older still, delicate and pale, but with eyes deeper and darker, like bottomless wells. "You came," the girl said softly, her voice echoing oddly in the stillness. "Where is this place?" Lydia asked, swallowing hard. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. "It's the hour lost between waking and sleeping," the girl replied. "The moment you vanish every night, the missing hour." Lydia's mind spun. The fog swirled around her ankles, tugging gently. "What happens there? Why am I here?" The girl's lips curled into a sad smile. "You don't belong here yet, but you're caught. The hour steals you bit by bit until you cross the threshold. Then you join the missing." A sudden chill filled the air. "Join them," Lydia repeated, dread rising in her chest. The girl's gaze flicked toward the shadows beneath the trees where shapes stirred, indistinct figures shifting between the fog. "They wait. Some try to return, others forget, but time doesn't move for them. They linger." "Can I go back?" The girl reached out, brushing a strand of Lydia's hair from her face. "Perhaps, but first you must understand." The wind whispered through the branches, and the fog thickened. Shapes emerged, children and adults alike, their faces pale and eyes hollow. They watched Lydia with a mix of hope and despair. Among them, a boy stepped forward. His eyes met hers with fierce intensity. "We are trapped," he said. "The hour took us. We want to warn you." Lydia's heart pounded. "How do I stop it?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. The boy's gaze darkened. "You can't, not alone. But if you find the key, the hourglass before the clock strikes again, you might break the cycle." The girl nodded. "But beware. The hour does not surrender easily." The landscape seemed to shift, the fog swirling violently. A distant chime echoed through the air, soft at first, then growing louder, like a tolling bell counting down time. Lydia's pulse quickened. "The clock is ticking," the girl said. She released Lydia's hand, fading back into the mist. Lydia stood alone amid the waiting shadows. The missing hour. The key. Her mind raced, but one truth rang clear. If she didn't act soon, she would join them. The tolling bell echoed through the dense mist, each chime reverberating like a heartbeat, counting down the precious seconds Lydia had left. Her breath came fast, but the fog clung to her skin and slowed her movements, making every step feel like wading through water. The waiting figures around her, ghostly and pale, parted silently as she moved forward, their hollow eyes fixed on her with a blend of hope and despair. She passed the boy who had spoken, his face etched with longing and fear, then pressed deeper into the twisting forest. "Where do I find this hourglass?" Lydia asked aloud, though only the fog answered. The forest seemed to close around her, the trees leaning in as if to listen. Shadows flitted just beyond sight, and whispers, unintelligible but urgent, trailed on the air. She felt eyes watching from the darkness, eyes that never blinked. Ahead, a faint glimmer caught her attention, not the warm glow she'd seen before, but a cold, flickering light suspended in the branches high above. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and beneath it, something rested on a stone pedestal covered in moss. Heart pounding, Lydia hurried toward it. On the pedestal lay an ornate hourglass, its glass chambers swirling with a shifting dark mist that seemed alive. The sands within moved backwards, grains climbing upward, defying gravity. As she reached out, a voice hissed behind her. "Don't take it!" A shadow detached itself from the trees, a figure tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing faint red, its mouth stretched into a sinister smile. "The hour isn't yours to steal," it whispered. Lydia's hand hesitated over the hourglass. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice shaking but firm. "An echo," it said. "A guardian of the lost. I was once like you, caught in the missing hour." The shadow stepped closer. "The hourglass binds us. If you claim it, you bind yourself too." Lydia's mind raced. Could she trust this figure, or was it a trap? Suddenly, the hourglass pulsed violently, and the sands within began to glow with eerie blue light. The tolling grew louder, faster. "Time runs out," the shadow warned. "Choose wisely." Steeling herself, Lydia grasped the hourglass. A searing chill shot through her body, and the fog exploded into a whirlwind around her. The figures watching screamed silently, their faces twisted in agony. She clutched the hourglass tight, and the world shattered like glass. Shards of reality cascaded around Lydia, each fragment reflecting distorted memories, visions both familiar and hauntingly strange. She felt herself spiraling through a torrent of broken moments, clinging desperately to the hourglass which pulsed with a heartbeat of its own. Suddenly, she landed hard, gasping, on cold floorboards. Her eyes snapped open. She was back in her house, but something was deeply wrong. The walls were gray and cracked, covered in layers of peeling wallpaper. Mold grew along the corners, spreading like veins. Her furniture stood broken and decayed, as though decades had passed in moments. It was her home, but twisted, consumed by neglect and time. The hourglass vibrated gently in her hands, its sands still flowing upward. Lydia rose unsteadily, her legs trembling, and approached the front door. It hung open, swaying slightly in a non-existent breeze, revealing a landscape beyond that chilled her blood. Grenton Hollow lay in ruin. Buildings leaned precariously. Roofs collapsed inward. Streets overtaken by weeds. Cars stood abandoned, rusted skeletons beneath a dark, bruised sky. Silence blanketed everything, heavy, oppressive, unnatural. "What happened here?" Lydia whispered, her voice echoing oddly. "Time," a voice answered from behind her. She spun, clutching the hourglass tighter. The little girl from the mirror stood there, her face serene yet sad. Her pale eyes studied Lydia intently. "You've crossed too far," she said gently. "Now you see what the hour has stolen." Lydia's chest tightened. "Can I fix this? Can I put things back?" The child's expression softened, sorrowful. "Perhaps, but every choice carries a price. What must I do?" The girl gestured toward the distant town center, where the old clock tower rose, still intact, standing like a sentinel over the decay. "Return the hourglass to the tower. Stop the cycle, but beware. The hour will fight you." Lydia nodded solemnly, determination hardening her resolve. She stepped outside, feeling the brittle grass crunch underfoot. Each stride toward town felt heavier than the last, the air thickening, resisting her movement. "All!" Whispers filled the silence, murmuring accusations, pleas, and warnings. Ghostly faces watched from behind broken windows. Faces Lydia half remembered from dreams, neighbors and strangers alike, all trapped in an endless loop. She quickened her pace, breaking into a jog as the whispers grew louder. angrier. The town seemed to shift around her, streets rearranging themselves, buildings appearing and disappearing, trying to disorient and trap her. "Stop!" Voices hissed from shadows, desperate and pleading. "Join us!" "Don't leave us here alone." She ignored them, fighting forward. The clock tower loomed closer, imposing yet strangely inviting, its ancient stones gleaming under the unnatural twilight. But as Lydia reached the square, the shadows surged forward, solidifying into forms, echoes of those lost to the hour. Men, women, children, dozens, eyes vacant and hollow, forming a barrier before her. "You cannot break the hour," they chanted in unison. "Stay with us." Remain in the lost moment forever. Lydia clutched the hourglass, heart hammering in her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking, "but I have to try." She plunged into the crowd, shadows tearing at her clothes, grasping at her limbs. Pain shot through her as their icy fingers brushed her skin. Memories not her own flooding her mind. Despair, loneliness, regret. Yet she pressed on, driven by an unyielding will. She reached the base of the tower, gasping. The door swung open, revealing a narrow spiral staircase ascending into darkness. Lydia glanced back once. The shadows hesitated, then faded reluctantly into mist, their murmurs sorrowful and resigned. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the tower, darkness swallowing her whole as the door slammed shut behind her. The hourglass glowed softly, illuminating her path upward. Inside the clock tower, darkness closed around Lydia like a heavy cloak, the only illumination coming from the faint, ghostly glow of the hourglass she gripped tightly. Its sands still flowed in reverse, defying gravity, pulsing gently in rhythm with the distant ticking echoing from above. The air was stale, musty with age and abandonment. Every step on the narrow spiral staircase sent echoes reverberating through the stone walls, creating an unsettling rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. Higher and higher she climbed, the darkness pressing closer, oppressive and suffocating. Shadows danced on the walls, forming shapes that stretched and twisted, whispers trailing just behind her ears. She felt unseen eyes watching from the gloom, their presence felt but never visible. "You shouldn't be here," a whisper hissed sharply, slicing through the silence. Lydia froze mid-step, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly she turned, eyes wide, peering down into the inky void below. Nothing but darkness greeted her gaze. "Who are you?" Lydia whispered back, voice shaking slightly. The shadows shifted again, curling around her ankles like icy smoke. "Those who guard," the voice whispered, overlapping with countless others. "Those who keep the hour safe." Lydia shivered, fighting the instinctive urge to flee back down the stairs. "I need to stop it," she said firmly, clutching the hourglass tighter. "Too many have suffered." The shadows hissed, displeased. They chose. They wandered into the hour willingly. "No!" Lydia shot back fiercely. "No one chose this. They were stolen, just like me." Silence stretched painfully before the voice responded, quieter now, almost regretful. "If you proceed, the hour will consume you completely." Lydia took a deep breath, feeling the cold stone under her hand. "It's already taken enough. If I don't try, no one will." The shadows withdrew slightly, and Lydia, resolute, continued her ascent, each step harder than the last, her muscles straining against unseen resistance. At last, she emerged into the clock's heart, a small, circular chamber lit by pale moonlight filtering through cracks in the ancient stone. Massive gears and cogs moved slowly, their metallic groans filling the space with an almost hypnotic rhythm. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal, worn, cracked, ancient, and obviously awaiting the hourglass. But between Lydia and her goal stood a figure tall, cloaked, faceless beneath the hood. "The final keeper," the figure spoke, voice echoing like metal scraping stone. "Few have reached this far. None have succeeded." "I have to," Lydia said, voice trembling but unwavering. "I can't let others suffer." The keeper raised one pale skeletal hand, revealing long, slender fingers tipped with sharp nails. "To restore what was lost, you must sacrifice something in return." time does not grant favors freely. Lydia swallowed, heart pounding wildly. What must I sacrifice? The keeper tilted its hooded head, silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its tone held something almost like sorrow. Your own hour, your own time. To break the cycle, you must remain here, guarding the balance, forever bound. Lydia's stomach clenched painfully, her own freedom for countless others. The choice hung heavily in the stillness of the chamber, the hourglass pulsing gently in her hands. There's no other way, Lydia whispered, voice barely audible. Time demands balance, the keeper replied, stepping aside slightly to reveal the pedestal clearly now. To reclaim the hour, another must fill the void. Lydia hesitated only briefly, thoughts racing, and faces flashed through her mind. The people of Grenton Hollow, lost souls trapped within a loop they couldn't break. She imagined their relief, their joy at freedom returned. Decision made, she stepped forward. Then I accept. With a final decisive motion, Lydia placed the hourglass onto the pedestal. A blinding white light exploded from within, bathing the chamber in brilliance. The gears turned faster, louder, roaring like thunder as the world shifted violently beneath her feet. Pain surged through Lydia, a tearing sensation deep within her chest, as if a part of her soul was ripped away. Her vision blurred, her breath stolen, yet within the pain, she felt an odd sense of peace. The keeper's voice drifted softly through the chaos, gentle and solemn. Welcome, Guardian. Your hour has ended. Your watch begins. As the light faded, Lydia felt herself change, bound to the hour forever. Lydia felt a profound stillness settle over her, sinking deep into her bones, deeper than any physical sensation she'd ever known. The fierce whirlwind of pain and light gradually dissipated, leaving behind a silence so profound that it resonated through her very being. Her body no longer felt tethered by gravity or the passage of time. Instead, she hovered, suspended in a state somewhere between existence and oblivion. Slowly, the world took shape around her once again. The chamber within the clock tower had changed subtly. The gears turned rhythmically, but now they pulsed softly, gently synchronized with her own heartbeat. The keeper was gone, leaving Lydia alone in the tower's heart, now bound forever to this strange place between moments. She looked down at her hands. They were translucent, shimmering faintly in the dim light, like reflections in water. She had become part of the hour itself, a guardian spirit bound to protect the fragile balance she'd restored. A sudden awareness filled her, a profound knowledge of every missing hour, every soul trapped within it. She could sense their confusion, their desperation, their yearning to return. But she felt more than their suffering. She also felt hope, the promise of restoration, the possibility of freedom. She had become both keeper and key, bound by sacrifice to ensure the cycle never stole another innocent again. Lydia drifted forward, her feet not quite touching the stone floor, drawn toward a shimmering portal that had appeared on the chamber's far wall. Through it, she could glimpse Grenton Hollow restored, buildings upright, streets filled with life, people moving through their days oblivious to the terrible loop they'd narrowly escaped. Yet, as she watched, she understood her new role, to ensure the missing hour never returned, to guard the fragile boundary she'd fought so desperately to mend. A gentle sound drew her attention, a soft, familiar voice echoing faintly from within the tower. Lydia turned, her heart swelling as she saw the pale form of the girl who'd guided her here, the younger reflection of herself, serene yet sorrowful. You chose bravely, the girl said softly, stepping closer. Few would have. Lydia nodded, feeling tears well up, even though she no longer had a physical form. I had to, she replied quietly. I couldn't let others endure what we did. The girl smiled gently. That's why the hour chose you. You had the strength to sacrifice, the compassion to guard. What happens now? Lydia asked softly, glancing toward the portal again. The girl tilted her head thoughtfully, eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. Now you watch, wait, and protect. You are part of the hour, but no longer trapped by it. You will feel each passing minute, each ticking second, but never again suffer its loss. Lydia took a deep breath, the sensation oddly comforting despite lacking lungs. Will I ever see them again, the ones I lost? The girl nodded gently, in glimpses. But never fully. Your connection to them is bound by memory alone now. A quiet sadness touched Lydia's heart, yet within it was a deep acceptance, a knowing that her sacrifice had purpose. You stay here too? Lydia asked. The girl shook her head slowly. My time ends here. I was merely an echo, your reflection caught in the hour's loop. You freed me, just as you freed the others. Lydia felt a pang of loss. Then I'll be alone. Others may come to challenge the hour. You'll guide them as I guided you. Lydia nodded, feeling a solemn pride grow within her, a duty accepted willingly, though born from necessity rather than choice. The girl reached out, her small hand brushing gently through Lydia's intangible form. Lydia felt a final, soft warmth, a goodbye filled with gratitude and love. Thank you, Lydia whispered, her voice carrying a weight of infinite meaning. The girl smiled softly once more, then faded slowly into mist, her presence lingering a moment longer before finally dissolving completely. Alone now, Lydia floated toward the portal again. She gazed out upon Grenton Hollow, feeling a sense of bittersweet longing mingled with satisfaction. Her friends, neighbors, the ordinary lives she cherished, they continued, unaware of the silent guardian who watched over them now. I will keep you safe, she whispered, her voice blending seamlessly with the ticking of the great clock around her, even if you'll never know. With quiet resolve, Lydia turned back to the hourglass resting securely upon its pedestal, sands flowing steadily now, forever balanced. Her vigil had begun. In the timeless stillness of the clock tower, Lydia began to comprehend the boundaries of her new existence. Her perception had altered, expanded to something beyond human senses. She could feel each tick of the clock resonating through the fibers of her being. She was no longer merely Lydia Graham. Now, she was an integral thread woven through the very fabric of lost moments, an unseen protector of fragile, forgotten seconds. Days passed, though she experienced them differently now. Each hour felt like the gentle turn of a page, slow and deliberate, but infused with infinite significance. She drifted through the tower, observing quietly as shadows danced softly along the stone walls, the pale light of dawn filtering through tiny cracks. There was peace here, though mingled always with a deep, lingering sorrow. Then, gradually, she began to sense a shift. A ripple moved gently through the air, subtle but distinct, like a stone dropped in still water. Lydia turned her awareness toward it, feeling curiosity bloom within her intangible form. The ripple coalesced into whispers, faint but persistent voices from somewhere outside the tower, from the town she'd once called home. She drifted closer to the portal, gazing through to where life unfolded in familiar rhythms. Grenton Hollow moved onward, blissfully unaware of the watcher in the tower. But something was changing. The voices that brushed her consciousness were troubled, anxious murmurs, conversations in hushed tones about strange dreams, half-remembered visions, and unsettling déjà vu. Lydia strained to listen, her awareness sharpening. They say something's not right again, came one voice, familiar yet distant. It was old Mrs. Hargrove, whose flower shop Lydia had frequented each spring. Like before? Another responded nervously, belonging to David Whitmore, the young man who delivered newspapers. The disappearances, the missing hours, like last year? Lydia felt a surge of alarm pulse through her essence. Had she failed? Had the missing hours somehow slipped free from her grasp? She focused inward, sensing the hourglass. Its sands still moved steadily, balanced, yet something felt strained, as if an invisible force pressed against it, searching for weakness. Another voice reached her, clearer, closer. This one she knew instantly. It was Charlotte, her younger sister. I can't sleep anymore, Charlotte confessed quietly to a friend. Every night I wake up at the same time, 33, and there's this feeling like someone's watching me. Lydia's heart, intangible yet deeply felt, clenched painfully. No, she whispered desperately, reaching toward the portal, though she could no longer pass through. Charlotte, please! A deeper shadow stirred behind her, and Lydia turned swiftly. A figure formed from darkness itself, tall and imposing, eyes glinting with subtle malice. "You can't save her," it murmured softly, voice deep and resonant. "The hour seeks its balance. One taken, another must replace. You knew the cost." "Who are you?" Lydia demanded fiercely, anger rising, a fire rekindled from within her ethereal form. The shadow stepped forward, its presence filling the chamber. "I am the first guardian, bound long before your time. I too sacrificed, but failed. The hour always returns, Lydia." "Then I'll stop it again," Lydia challenged defiantly. "You misunderstand," it replied quietly, almost regretfully. "Your sister is already slipping. The hour whispers to her now, as it once whispered to you. Her sacrifice may become inevitable." Lydia recoiled, anguish surging within her. "I won't let it have her. I won't lose anyone else." The guardian tilted its shadowy head. "Then you must choose again. Either surrender yourself completely to the hour, losing all you've preserved, or allow another soul to take your place. Such is the balance." Lydia's mind spun with despair. Had her sacrifice meant nothing? Was the hour destined always to claim more victims? The guardian watched her struggle, its form shimmering gently. "You are bound by your compassion," it said softly, "but the hour knows no mercy. If you truly wish to break this cycle, you must shatter it at the source." "The source?" Lydia echoed desperately. "Deep beneath this tower lies the heart of the missing hour, the moment it was first created. Destroy that, and you free everyone. But beware, to reach it, you must cross through your own lost hour once more. The memories, the pain, everything you've hidden away, you must face them." Lydia hesitated only briefly. Her choice was clear. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered firmly. The guardian nodded solemnly, fading slowly back into darkness. "Then your final journey begins. The hour will test you as never before." With resolve blazing brightly within her, Lydia turned toward the stairwell leading downward, toward the heart of the hour itself, toward her past, toward the possibility of redemption. She descended, each step pulling her deeper into darkness and memories long buried, determined to save Charlotte and every soul in Grenton Hollow, even if it meant losing herself entirely. Lydia descended deeper beneath the clock tower, each step plunging her further into a darkness that seemed alive, breathing around her like a silent predator. The stairway spiraled endlessly downward, the air growing colder, denser, pressing against her intangible form as if to resist her advance. With every step, memories began to surface, fragments of her past life floating like debris on a dark sea, each vivid and sharp-edged. She saw moments she'd long forgotten, childhood laughter echoing through summer fields, whispered secrets beneath starlit skies, and the quiet sorrow of unspoken goodbyes. But as she ventured further, darker memories emerged, ones she had desperately buried. She saw her mother, frail and fading, in a hospital bed, holding Lydia's hand tightly as the final breath left her body. She relived the crushing weight of grief, the nights spent awake staring at empty walls. She saw arguments with Charlotte, heated and painful, wounds left open by words they could never take back. Each memory was like a physical blow, forcing Lydia to pause, to gather her resolve before continuing down the staircase. The hours seemed determined to break her, using her own life against her. But Lydia pressed on, clinging to the thought of Charlotte's desperate plea, her voice echoing in Lydia's heart. She couldn't let the hour claim her sister. She couldn't allow her sacrifice to be meaningless. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lydia reached the bottom step. Before her lay a vast cavern, carved from black stone and lit by faintly glowing crystals embedded in the walls. At its center was a still, dark lake, its waters reflecting no light, only endless shadow, the heart of the hour. A voice drifted softly across the cavern, a voice she knew intimately, yet had not heard in years. "Lydia?" She turned sharply. Standing at the edge of the lake was her mother, exactly as she remembered, her face gentle, eyes filled with warmth and sadness. "Mom?" Lydia whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, sweetheart," her mother replied softly, extending a hand. "Come here." Lydia hesitated, feeling a rush of longing and loss. She stepped forward, drawn instinctively toward the familiar comfort she had missed for so many years. "Is it really you?" Lydia asked cautiously, stopping just short of reaching her mother's hand. Her mother smiled sadly. I'm as real as you need me to be. Lydia pulled back slightly, suspicion dawning. You're not her. You're another illusion. The figure's smile faltered slightly, eyes darkening with hidden intent. Does it matter? Stay here, Lydia, with me, with the memories you cherish. No more pain, no more struggle. Lydia shook her head firmly, drawing on inner strength she'd never known she possessed. No, I can't. Charlotte needs me. Renton Hollow needs me. I won't abandon them. The illusion faded instantly, replaced by a dark, swirling figure emerging from the lake, the true manifestation of the hour itself. It towered over her, vast and shapeless, its voice echoing like thunder. Then you choose suffering, it roared, darkness surging around her. You reject peace, reject oblivion. You cling to pain, fear, regret. No, Lydia shouted defiantly, standing tall. I choose to end your control. To set them free. The hour laughed, a deep, echoing sound that shook the cavern's walls. Freedom is an illusion. Time binds all, even you, guardian. Lydia raised her voice, steady and clear. Not if the chain is broken, not if your source is destroyed. The hour's form rippled angrily. You cannot destroy me without destroying yourself. Your existence is bound to mine. Your sacrifice will mean oblivion. Then so be it, Lydia replied quietly, resolution firm in her voice. I will accept oblivion if it means everyone else is free. So be it, the hour finally echoed, its voice solemn. Face your final test. Embrace your truth. Suddenly, from the lake's depths rose a pedestal, upon which rested another hourglass, this one cracked and ancient, filled with shimmering black sand swirling violently within. Break it, the hour commanded softly, but know the cost. Lydia stepped forward, feeling her essence flicker, waver. With shaking hands, she grasped the hourglass. Visions surged through her, her childhood home, Charlotte laughing, her mother's final moments, her own quiet life, everything she'd known and cherished. She closed her eyes tightly, whispered a silent goodbye, and raised the hourglass high above her head. Then, with all the strength she could muster, she threw it to the ground. It shattered instantly, exploding into shards of brilliant light and shadow. Lydia felt herself pulled apart, unraveling into infinite threads of memory and loss. The cavern trembled violently, collapsing around her. In her final moment, Lydia felt peace, a quiet acceptance, a knowing she'd made the right choice. Charlotte would live, Grenton Hollow would thrive, and the missing hour was forever banished. Darkness took her, gentle and absolute. Charlotte bolted awake, heart racing and breath ragged, the echo of a scream dying in her throat. She sat upright, chest heaving, eyes darting frantically around her darkened bedroom. The digital clock beside her bed glowed ominously, its red digits unwavering, 3033 a.m. She closed her eyes, desperately trying to calm her pounding heart. The dream had been vivid, frighteningly real. Lydia had been there, calling out to her, begging for help from within a place Charlotte couldn't reach. She could still hear Lydia's voice, strained and urgent, echoing through her mind. Pushing aside the blankets, Charlotte stood shakily, stepping onto the cool wooden floor. The house was silent, eerily still, but something felt different, as if an invisible presence lingered nearby, watching and waiting. She stepped cautiously into the hallway, glancing toward Lydia's old bedroom at the end of the corridor. The door stood slightly ajar, an invitation or a warning. Charlotte wasn't certain which. A chill crawled down her spine, but determination compelled her forward. She nudged the door wider, stepping inside for the first time since Lydia's unexplained disappearance months ago. The room was untouched, frozen in time. The bed remained unmade, Lydia's slippers placed neatly beside it. Charlotte's gaze drifted toward a small table, where a dusty digital recorder lay forgotten. Drawn instinctively to it, Charlotte picked it up, pressing the playback button with trembling fingers. Static crackled softly. Then Lydia's voice came through, distorted yet unmistakably clear. Charlotte, I'm sorry. If you're hearing this, the hour took me. But I broke its hold. Please don't let it take you. Don't follow. Don't trust the shadows. Remember me, but move forward. Promise me." The recording ended abruptly. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Lydia," she whispered into the silence. "What happened to you?" Days passed, but Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She found herself waking nightly at 3033, the same dread filling her veins each time. She began to notice small disturbances, windows left ajar, misplaced objects, strange noises echoing softly through the house after dark. Despite Lydia's warning, curiosity and grief drove Charlotte deeper into searching for answers. She scoured through Lydia's belongings, finding notes scribbled hastily in old journals, cryptic references to an hourglass, missing hours, and shadowy figures. She became obsessed, piecing together fragments until she finally discovered a reference that stopped her cold. The clock tower holds the secret. It guards the lost hour. The hourglass binds and frees. Charlotte knew immediately the tower Lydia meant. The old stone clock tower in the center of Grenton Hollow, abandoned for years. Driven by desperation, Charlotte made her way there late one night, the air crisp and heavy with mist. The tower loomed, dark and foreboding, standing sentinel against a starless sky. Its doors stood open, waiting. She stepped inside, feeling an immediate sense of familiarity, as if she'd been here before. The shadows inside shifted as she climbed upward, their whispers trailing behind her. She hesitated once, nearly turning back, but Lydia's voice echoed in her memory, urging her onward. At the tower's peak, Charlotte found a chamber bathed in soft moonlight. In its center stood a pedestal, empty, waiting. Behind her, a shadow coalesced, forming into a tall figure. "Charlotte," it whispered gently, voice soothing yet filled with hidden menace. "You've come at last." Charlotte spun, heart racing. The shadowy figure before her seemed simultaneously familiar and alien, a twisted echo of something human, yet not quite real. "What are you?" Charlotte demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am the hour," it replied softly, stepping closer. "The boundary between waking and sleeping. Your sister tried to destroy me." "She failed." Lydia freed the others. Charlotte shot back defiantly. "But not herself," the figure whispered. "She remains trapped, forever guarding my heart." Charlotte's fists clenched. "Let her go." The figure tilted its head slowly. "You misunderstand. Lydia chose this. She sacrificed herself willingly." Charlotte felt tears burn her eyes. "Why are you here, then? Why do you torment me?" "Because," the shadow said softly, "the balance must be restored. Lydia's sacrifice disrupted it. You must choose now. Leave this place and forget, or take Lydia's place, restoring balance and freeing her at last." Charlotte's heart ached. She knew the choice was impossible, cruelly unfair, yet Lydia's voice echoed clearly in her mind. "Don't follow. Promise me." "No," Charlotte said firmly, though her voice trembled. "I won't take her place. Lydia would never forgive me." "Then she remains," the shadow replied calmly, "forever bound." Charlotte stared helplessly around the chamber. Her gaze landed on a glinting object partially hidden in the shadows, a small, cracked hourglass. Without hesitation, she lunged for it, grasping the fragile object tightly. The shadow recoiled, hissing furiously. "Fool! You can't break me!" Charlotte raised the hourglass high, determination blazing in her eyes. "Watch me!" She hurled it downward, shattering it with a brilliant flash of light. The shadow howled, twisting violently before dissolving into nothingness. The chamber shook violently. Charlotte stood alone, breathing heavily. Something within had changed, a stillness settling deep in her chest. Had she done it? Then, softly, a voice spoke behind her. "Charlotte!" She turned, breath catching sharply. Lydia stood there, smiling gently, her form translucent yet unmistakably real. "You broke it," Lydia whispered gratefully. "You ended it." Charlotte reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing through Lydia's spectral form. "I promised," Charlotte said softly, tears streaming freely. Lydia smiled sadly. "I'm free now. Thank you." Slowly, Lydia faded, leaving Charlotte alone in the silent tower, free, yet forever changed by the missing hour's final reckoning. Charlotte descended the spiral stairs of the clock tower in silence, her legs heavy, each step resonating through the ancient stone like a heartbeat slowing after a long run. She clutched the railing for support, though the sensation of her surroundings had begun to shift. Everything felt thinner, less tangible, like the boundary between waking and dreaming had blurred. She had broken the hourglass. She had defied the shadow. She had spoken Lydia's name aloud. And something had changed. Outside, Grenton Hollow remained wrapped in pre-dawn stillness, the sky a velvet canvas stretched with silver threads. Yet the quiet was no longer oppressive. The ever-present sense of being watched, of something holding its breath just beyond the edge of perception, had lifted. Charlotte could feel it as she stepped into the street. The hour was gone. She wandered aimlessly at first, her steps light, almost detached from her body. Everything looked the same, yet felt different. The trees didn't sway with menace. The houses no longer loomed. The shadows under porch eaves no longer crawled with whispers. It was over. Still, she walked, past her old high school, past the corner diner where she and Lydia used to get milkshakes on summer nights, past the cemetery where the gates no longer creaked as though in mourning. Finally, she reached their house. Lydia's house, now empty, preserved in dust and silence. She stepped through the door and stood in the foyer, unwilling to turn on the lights. She didn't need to see it clearly. She knew every inch of this place. The framed photos still hung crooked on the wall. The scent of old wood and dried lavender still clung to the air, and somewhere upstairs in Lydia's room, the recorder still lay on the bedside table, as if waiting to be picked up one last time. Charlotte climbed the stairs slowly, feet brushing over the grooves. Lydia's slippers used to leave on the floor. In the room, the bed remained unmade. The mirror, now covered in a white sheet, stood silent and inert. She sat on the edge of the mattress and picked up the recorder. It felt lighter somehow, powerless, as if it too had been released. She pressed play anyway, static at first, then a single voice, Lydia's. If this reaches you, then maybe the hour is broken. Maybe you did what I couldn't. Charlotte, if you're listening, I want you to know something. I didn't give up. I made a choice. And if you're hearing this, it means you chose too. You faced the dark. I'm proud of you, and I love you. Not of grief, but of relief. She lay down in the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. At some point, sleep took her, and for the first time in weeks, no dreams came to claim her, only peace. Charlotte awoke to sunlight, not the dim, colorless gray she had grown used to, but real sunlight, amber and warm, cutting gently across the walls in long bands. For a moment, she thought she'd dreamed it all. The tower, the hour, Lydia. But when she glanced at the bedside table, the recorder was still there. She rose and walked to the window. The town looked the same, but her perception of it had shifted. The veil had been lifted. People strolled the sidewalks. Cars moved along Main Street. Laughter from a nearby schoolyard filtered through the air like a forgotten song. Still barefoot, Charlotte padded downstairs and made coffee in silence. The house creaked comfortingly. Birds sang. Somewhere, a dog barked. Later that day, she wandered into town. Faces she recognized greeted her, some with surprise, others with relief. "You've been keeping to yourself lately," Hargrove said from behind her counter at the florist shop. "Just working through things," Charlotte replied, and meant it. She visited the library, checked in at the diner, and found herself outside the old tower once again. The doors were shut now, sealed. Ivy had already begun to reclaim the stone. No one else seemed to see it as anything other than an empty old relic. Charlotte touched the door once, felt the cold stone, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she left. In the following weeks, she started writing. Not just in journals, but truly writing, crafting the story, threading together memory and metaphor. It wasn't just for her anymore. It was for anyone who might someday feel the tremor at 3033. Anyone who woke with a missing hour and didn't know why. Her manuscript began. There is a moment that doesn't appear on any clock, a breath stolen from time, an hour that vanishes, unnoticed by the world, but not by everyone. And though she wrote it as fiction, every word was true. On the 1-year anniversary of the hour's breaking, Charlotte returned to Grenton Hollow. She hadn't meant to. The town had become a place of memory, a museum of emotion too heavy to carry, but something called her back. A whisper in a dream, a flicker in the corner of her vision. She couldn't ignore it. She parked outside Lydia's house. Inside, the dust was undisturbed. The photos on the wall hadn't moved, but the silence didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt full, alive. She stepped into Lydia's room and peeled the white sheet off the mirror. It reflected her as it should. Tired eyes, a faint smile, wind-tangled hair. But for the briefest of seconds, just behind her, a second figure stood. Not sinister, not a shadow, Lydia. Smiling. That night, Charlotte returned to the tower once more. It was overgrown now. No one had been inside since the hour's collapse, but Charlotte stood before it and whispered, "We remember." Somewhere deep inside, a single clock ticked. Charlotte stayed in Grenton Hollow longer than intended. What had begun as a brief visit to honor her sister's memory stretched into a slow, aching return, not out of obligation, but something gentler, something unspoken, a pull that tugged at the quiet corners of her spirit. She rented a small apartment above the town's old bookstore, the kind of place with uneven floors, warped windows, and the smell of paper soaked deep into its bones. Most days, she wrote, working steadily on the manuscript that had once been a form of therapy, but now felt like a responsibility. Her nights were uneventful, peaceful. She slept through the dreaded hour, but that didn't mean the hour had been forgotten. One evening, as dusk rolled across the rooftops and the air took on that hush unique to towns like Grenton Hollow, Charlotte wandered to the edge of town. There was an old road that curved toward the woods, barely used anymore, flanked by tall grass and trees that leaned just slightly toward the asphalt, as if they were listening. At the very end of that road stood a house no one remembered building. Charlotte had walked past it countless times in her childhood and had never truly seen it. That was the strange part. It had always been just there. A place no one visited, a place no one talked about. The windows were always shuttered, the gate always latched. Not abandoned, just paused. Tonight, for the first time, the front door was open, only a crack. She froze at the gate, heart beginning to thud, not with fear, but anticipation, recognition. It was the same kind of feeling she'd had the night she climbed the tower, the night she found the hourglass, the night Lydia had spoken to her from the veil between worlds. This place was tied to it all. She pushed the gate open slowly. The hinges didn't creak. They breathed, like something rousing from sleep. Gravel crunched under her boots as she stepped onto the path. The trees above rustled, though no wind stirred. The door stood still, unmoving, that crack wide enough for a shadow to slip through. Charlotte stepped inside. The air was cool and dry, filled with the faint scent of time, old paper, burnt wood, lavender. She stood in a narrow foyer lined with faded wallpaper. A grandfather clock ticked softly in the corner, though its hands didn't move. "Hello," she called, voice soft. Silence. To her left, a sitting room held furniture draped in white cloth. Dust floated in the air like snow. She moved forward slowly, running a hand along a covered armchair, fingers coming away clean. No dust. The house wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Every wall bore framed photographs, but all the faces were blurred, as though the people inside had moved just as the shutter clicked. A hallway stretched toward the back of the house, narrowing as it went, until it ended at a door unlike the others. This one was wooden, thick, and painted black. No handle, no hinges, just a brass keyhole. Charlotte reached instinctively into her coat pocket. She paused. She didn't remember putting anything there, but her fingers closed around something cold and metallic. A key, ornate, old. The key slid into the lock smoothly, as if it had always been meant to fit. The door opened inward with a soft sigh, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Charlotte hesitated for only a moment. Then she began to descend. The stairs wound down in impossible ways, turning not just in direction, but in memory. She passed images burned into the walls like ghosts. Lydia in the mirror, the shattered hourglass, the faces of the lost. Each step was a surrender, each turn a test. She emerged into a vast chamber, circular and smooth, filled with a faint, pulsing blue light. In its center stood a single object, a mirror, not ornate, not mystical, just a plain silver frame, clean and cold. Charlotte approached slowly. Her reflection gazed back. Tired eyes, windswept hair, jaw clenched tight with silent resolve. Then the mirror shifted. Her reflection stepped forward. Not toward her, out of her. The second Charlotte stepped away from the glass, taking form. Flesh, bone, breath, identical in every way, yet different. The other Charlotte smiled, head tilting slightly. "Hello again," she said. "I've been waiting a long time." Charlotte stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. "What is this?" "The mirror." Charlotte walked slowly around the chamber, fingers grazing the stone walls. "I'm the part of you you left behind," she said simply. "The fragment you had to cast off to survive." "You broke the hour, yes, but you didn't break its echo. Not completely." Charlotte swallowed hard. "You're not real. I'm as real as your fear, as your memory." The other Charlotte turned to face her. "You left me in the hour, just like Lydia once did. I waited. And now I want out." Charlotte stared into her own face, the same voice, the same posture, but colder, sharper. She could see the difference now, like the difference between a person and their shadow. "What happens if I say no?" The double stepped closer. "Then I stay here. And you keep walking, feeling half whole for the rest of your life. Or we trade places. You rest. I walk forward, fully whole, the balance restored." Charlotte shook her head. "No, that's not a balance. That's surrender." "You're tired," the double said softly. "You ache every morning. You listen for voices in the silence. You write stories to keep the dark away." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "That's life!" Her shadow self stopped, stared. "Then you choose it. Completely. No more doors. No more looking back." Charlotte took a deep breath, then stepped forward and touched the mirror again. "I choose life," she said, "and you stay here. Not as punishment, but as memory. You are part of me, but I am whole." For a moment, the double didn't move. "Then," she smiled, "then maybe we both find peace." She turned, stepped into the mirror, and vanished. The glass shimmered once, then turned black. Charlotte stood in the silence for a long time. Then she turned and climbed the stairs back to the surface, into the rising sun, into her life, into her hour. But Charlotte didn't speak of the house to anyone, not because she feared being disbelieved, but because she knew it wouldn't exist anymore. By the time she returned the next day, the road was just that, a road, empty, overgrown. Where the strange, forgotten house once stood, there was now only tall grass and a rotting fence post leaning at a strange angle. She walked the length of it twice, searching for any trace of what she'd seen. Nothing, no stone, no foundation, no staircase descending into memory. The mirror was gone too. That night, back in her small apartment above the bookstore, Charlotte dreamt of ticking, not loud, not urgent, just persistent, like a pocket watch in the breast of a coat long since put away. A sound that didn't intrude but reminded. She opened her eyes at 3033 a.m. Not startled, not afraid, just aware. She sat up slowly and turned toward the desk where she kept her journals and drafts. There, sitting atop a closed notebook, was an object that hadn't been there the night before. A clock. Not a digital one, but an old travel clock, brass and worn with age. The glass scratched slightly, the minute hand moving gently forward with each quiet tick. She picked it up. It was warm. A slip of folded paper rested beneath it, as if the clock had been carefully placed to keep it from blowing away. Her name was written on the outside in Lydia's handwriting. She unfolded the note with trembling hands. Time is never really lost, only hidden. "Thank you, Charlie." Tears sprang to her eyes unbidden, not of sadness, but of recognition. Lydia was gone, but not gone. The missing hour had been broken. The echoes had been silenced, but some part of her remained, not trapped, not haunting, just watching, remembering. Charlotte placed the clock on her nightstand. It ticked on, patient and unbothered. And when she lay back in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, she didn't feel hollow. She didn't feel afraid. She felt present. The weeks that followed brought clarity. Charlotte's manuscript was accepted for publication. A small press, nothing flashy, but the editor called her personally, voice trembling with something close to reverence. "I don't know how to explain it," the editor had said, "but it felt like you were writing about something real. Like you'd seen something no one else could." Charlotte smiled. "I did." The book was published under the title The Missing Hour. Critics called it a psychological ghost story, a metaphor for grief, a strange tale about lost time. Some readers swore it helped them sleep better. Others said they started waking at 3:30 a.m. Charlotte didn't respond to reviews. She kept writing. Not more horror, not even fiction at first. She wrote letters to Lydia, stored in a worn leather binder beneath her bed. Letters full of stories, observations, and questions. She never expected a reply. But sometimes, when the wind blew just right through the cracks in the window, she swore she heard paper rustle back. On the night of the book's one-year anniversary, Charlotte stood once more outside the clock tower. It remained closed. Silent. She sat on the front steps, the manuscript in her lap, the brass clock in her coat pocket ticking steadily beside her heartbeat. The stars were unusually bright overhead, constellations gleaming like scattered silver nails hammered into the black. From somewhere deep inside the tower, a single chime echoed. Low, deep, not menacing, just a reminder. Charlotte closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm still here." And somewhere, just out of reach, Lydia whispered back, "I know." A full season passed before Charlotte saw the sign. It was early autumn, one of those sharp, golden days when the wind smells like dry leaves and memory. She was walking through the far corner of the town square, a place where most shops had shuttered years ago, when she noticed something new, or perhaps old, in a new way. The faded awning above the dusty windows read, "The Hollow Archives." She blinked. She had never seen this building before. She turned in a slow circle. Yes, she was on Chapel Street. Yes, this corner had always been an empty lot, fenced and neglected since the fire 10 years ago. She remembered the fire. Everyone in Grenton Hollow remembered it. So what was this? The windows were cloudy with dust, but a warm yellow light flickered faintly from within. A placard on the door read, "Hours, 3:00 p.m., 3:33 a.m., by invitation only." She laughed aloud softly, nervously. Some kind of elaborate joke, a themed bookstore, a Halloween stunt? But as she stepped closer, she felt it again, that subtle shift in the air, that low, familiar vibration beneath the skin, the sense that something was leaning in, listening. Without thinking, she pressed her hand to the door. It opened. The bell above the frame didn't jingle. It let out a tick sharp and mechanical. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ink and vellum, like old libraries and half-forgotten monasteries. The room was dim, lined floor to ceiling with shelves that leaned under the weight of books. Some were neatly labeled with call numbers. Others were tied shut with silk ribbon. Still others had no markings at all. Behind a desk sat a woman. She wore a high-collared black blouse with delicate pearl buttons and half-moon glasses that gleamed in the soft lamplight. Her hair was pinned back with bronze combs. She looked up and smiled, not surprised, not startled, expectant. "Charlotte Graham," she said. "It's about time." Charlotte froze, her heartbeat once hard. "You know me?" The woman nodded, rising smoothly from the desk. "We've been keeping a file on you for quite some. Well, you know." She gestured toward a cabinet behind her. The drawers were labeled with names, some faded, some burned in crisp golden type. Charlotte stepped forward. One drawer read, "G.A. Ham, L. Another G.A. Ham, C." She opened her own. Inside were pages upon pages, handwritten, typewritten, yellowed clippings, photographs, tape reels. At the very bottom lay a small velvet pouch containing the broken sand of an hourglass. Charlotte turned back to the woman. "What is this place?" of what almost happened, of what almost was lost, of what was broken and what was healed. Charlotte ran her hands over the pages, her entire life recorded, but not just the life she had lived, the one she hadn't, the missing hours, the choices never made, the shadow self she'd refused to become. "Why show me this now?" she whispered. The archivist smiled. "Because you passed the threshold, you broke the cycle." "Few do." Charlotte closed the drawer slowly. "What happens now?" The woman returned to her seat and folded her hands neatly atop the desk. "You rest, you write, you live." "That's it for now," the woman replied. "But time, as you know, is rarely linear. Doors open, clocks rewind, shadows shift." Charlotte nodded slowly. "And Lydia?" The woman tilted her head slightly, considering. "She's not here," she said gently, "but her record is complete. Her story is safe." Charlotte felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't cry, not this time, but her voice wavered. "Can I read it?" The archivist smiled again and slid a bound book across the desk. The spine was simple, no title, only Lydia's initials etched in silver leaf. "You already have," she said, "but it's different when you know it's real." Charlotte took the book in both hands and turned toward the door. As she left, the bell ticked again. Outside, the archive was gone. Only the lot remained, fenced and wild, the wind rustling through tall grass. But the book in her hands was real, and the ticking, now faint and distant, followed her home like a memory refusing to fade. Charlotte didn't open the book right away. For days, she kept it wrapped in a soft cloth and stored on her writing desk beneath the window, where it sat untouched but not forgotten. Occasionally, she'd brush her fingers along the cover, tracing the silver-etched initials, LG, letting the weight of it remind her that this wasn't just a journal or keepsake. This was Lydia, or more accurately, what was left of Lydia in the spaces where time had folded inward. On the third night after her visit to the archive, Charlotte sat down, lit a single candle, and turned open the first page. There was no preface, no title, only a date, March 12, 33 a.m., and beneath that, I thought time would end in a scream, but instead it ended in silence. I heard the clock stop one by one. I watched the hands curl back. I watched the hour forget itself. It was beautiful and terrifying. Charlotte read for hours. Page after page unfolded Lydia's experience from within the missing hour, her thoughts fragmented and poetic, her observations painful in their clarity. Lydia had watched the town sleep. She had watched Charlotte sleep. She had wandered through streets that bent in impossible directions, where buildings whispered her name and the stars blinked out one by one. She spoke of the mirror, not the one in the house Charlotte had found, but the first mirror, the one beneath the tower, older than memory, built by something not quite human. They said the mirror was forged from the stillness between seconds, that it reflects not who you are, but what you are hiding. Charlotte shivered. She remembered her own reflection stepping out to confront her. She remembered choosing life over illusion, wholeness over escape. Toward the middle of the book, Lydia's tone shifted. The pages became gentler, reflective. She described watching people wake up and forget her. She described love, not romantic, not familial, but love in its purest form, the act of watching someone grow, even when you are no longer beside them. You learned to write again. You made coffee too strong and didn't notice. You stood by the riverbank and skipped stones. And you didn't cry that morning. Not once. That's when I knew I could go. Charlotte wiped tears from her eyes, her fingers trembling as she turned to the final entry. March 12, 33 a.m. Exactly 1 year later. The hour comes full circle, but this time I don't feel fear. I feel peace. Time doesn't end, Charlotte. It rests. It heals. It forgets and forgives. I watched the hour break, and I watched you rise from its ashes, and that will always be enough. If you find this, if they let you see it, then remember, there is a door in every silence. There is a truth in every stillness. And I will always be in both. Charlotte closed the book gently. The candle had burned nearly to its end. Wax pooled at its base, flickering shadows stretching long across the floor. She sat in the silence for a long time, holding the closed journal against her chest, not crying, not breaking, just remembering. Outside her window, the town slept peacefully. Somewhere beneath that sleep, the echoes of the missing hours stirred one last time, not in threat, not in hunger, but in acknowledgement. The hour had passed. The cycle was broken. And Lydia had found her place, not in shadows or silence, but in the story Charlotte would carry forward. Grenton Hollow never knew what it had survived. Years later, when Charlotte returned one last time to visit the graveyard perched on the hill above the town, she saw a place untouched by the horrors it had brushed against. Children played on swings near the old chapel. The windows of the bakery glowed warm with morning light. The clock tower still stood, stoic and unassuming, its chime long since silent but somehow not mournful anymore. Just present, the world had continued. That was always the truth about endings. The world kept moving forward. But for Charlotte, the story had never been about the end. It had been about the space around endings, the pause, the breath, the hour that didn't fit anywhere else. She stood now in front of Lydia's grave, a simple stone nestled under an old elm. The marker was modest, Lydia Graham, beloved sister, keeper of the hour. Below that, Charlotte had added her own inscription years earlier. She remembered so we could forget. The wind stirred, tugging gently at the edges of Charlotte's scarf. She placed a small clock at the base of the headstone, brass and quiet, identical to the one she kept on her nightstand all these years. It didn't tick anymore. It had stopped at 3033 a.m. and never started again. But that felt right. Some things were meant to stay paused. Imichu, meant to stay paused. Charlotte knelt beside the grave, running her fingers gently across the weathered inscription. "I think you would have liked it," she said aloud, smiling. "The way the town kept going, the way no one remembers the tower being open, or the missing hours. It's as if time forgave us." A faint gust blew past her, warm and strange, as if the wind had paused just long enough to listen. She stood slowly, brushing off her coat, and turned back toward town. Her hair, now touched with gray at the temples, caught the morning light as she descended the hill. The path wound downward through trees that had grown tall and golden. The grass underfoot crunched softly. Her gait was slower than it used to be, but deliberate. She was not the girl who had faced the shadow. She was the woman who had remembered it and written it down so no one else had to. Charlotte's book had outlived its first printing and its second. It was taught in certain university literature classes, sometimes as speculative horror, sometimes as a fictionalized account of grief recovery. It made the rounds on sleep podcasts and late-night YouTube narrations, often paired with rainfall and piano music. Some dismissed it as a clever metaphor. Others swore it changed their dreams. One reader mailed her a clock with no hands. Another sent a recording of themselves reciting the entire book at 3033 a.m. with no background noise. Charlotte kept those mementos in a trunk in her attic, not because she believed they held power, but because they represented something important, that the hour had touched more than just her. She continued writing, though nothing ever reached quite the same level of impact. And that was fine. The missing hour had never been about acclaim. It had been a record, a final ripple. Years later, Charlotte bought a cottage by the sea, a small place, tucked between weathered dunes and bent pines, where the fog rolled in thick and silent each morning. It had no clocks, none were needed, but every so often, when she found herself staring at the horizon as the sun disappeared, she'd feel it, the weight of a second that didn't belong, the hush of something not quite finished, a sensation like someone standing just behind her, watching the waves too. She never turned around, not because she was afraid, but because she already knew who it was. Sometimes, late at night, she'd dream of the mirror room again. Not the one beneath the clock tower, not the one in the vanished house, but a new room, quiet and endless, where time stood not still but content. In those dreams, Lydia would be there, sitting on a bench made of soft light, watching her sister with that familiar half-smile. They never spoke. They didn't need to. On her final morning many years later, Charlotte rose before dawn. The air smelled of salt and pine. She sat in her old wicker chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, notebook in her lap. She didn't write that morning. She simply listened. Outside, the waves broke in slow rhythm. Birds stirred in the branches overhead. The clock, the one with no hands, sat beside her cup of tea, unmoving. At exactly 3033 a.m., the house grew perfectly still. Charlotte closed her eyes and smiled. A note unread. After her passing, Charlotte's niece, a quiet woman named Mira, who had inherited her aunt's fondness for old books and stranger tales, found a sealed envelope in the desk drawer. It was addressed simply, "For when you hear the ticking again." Inside was a single sheet of paper. Time is not an enemy. It is a record keeper, a listener, a healer. If you ever lose your way, follow the silence between seconds. That's where the truth waits. C.G. Mira folded the note carefully, returned it to the envelope, and placed it in the hollow spine of a book titled The Missing Hour. Then, one rainy evening, she sat down to read it aloud. As she reached the midpoint, the chapter where Lydia first steps into the clock tower, the wind outside stopped. Not slowed, stopped. And for just a moment, Mira could have sworn she heard something behind her. Not a voice, not a whisper, just ticking, faint, distant, and kind.